Hi, everybody. Good morning. I am so excited to be here with you today and to share some of this work around crossing the chasm, change and resilience within organizations. So I'm Julie Lowndes. I go by Julie. You're welcome to call me that. I'm at Openscapes, and I'm here presenting with my co-author, Eli Holmes from NOAA Fisheries, and a large community effort across NOAA, NASA, and beyond. It is such a privilege to share these stories, and I think something that came up yesterday was the idea of amplifying and forking each other's stories as part of the collective action that we can do together as part of the CNG community. And so I hope you keep that in mind as you hear these stories and think about how these can show up and you can amplify them beyond. So a tiny look at how it started, how it's going. I'm a marine ecologist, and in 2017, I led a paper with my team about how we were doing better science in less time due to open data science tools. And it was really about not just how amazing these tools were, but about how we transitioned from our old way of working into a new paradigm with these tools. I was able to start Openscapes as an open source movement and approach in 2018 with a fellowship from Mozilla, and subsequently have started a small business in order to be the funding operations behind this movement. And we are supporting organizations making really big change. These are our federal partners that are, and state and cancer research partners that are making really big change. And we've been recognized by the White House last year, by the Biden-Harris White House, about this movement towards kinder science and open science. And so it's been an amazing journey with so many people involved. Eli Holmes and I have been close collaborators for years now, and we both have a long history of actionable science and teaching. Like I said, I'm at Openscapes, and I have this background as a marine ecologist, and Eli Holmes is at NOAA Fisheries. This is a group, it's part of NOAA, and it's responsible for the stewardship of the nation's ocean resources and their habitat. And she's been there for 25 years as an applied mathematician, and now she is the open science lead across the agency. And this Venn diagram is really represents a lot of our shared interests and why we got so jazzed to work together. We really love mentoring and passing forward what we learn. It's not just about the products that we develop and we use, but about how we can invite other folks to use these and to become contributors and builders of these tools as well as teachers. So that part of our story is about how a small spark of two people meeting through our networks, Eric Ward, Aaron Robinson, have really helped us build something much larger than ourselves. So before I dive into all of the awesomeness here, I want to step back and think about this idea of crossing the chasm with this story that Eli tells around selling a sheepdog. Okay, so let's remove ourselves from open source tech and cloud and think about puppies, okay? So imagine a world where someone first had the idea to train a dog to herd sheep rather than chasing sheep, harassing sheep, killing sheep, right? This is the idea of an early adopter, someone who saw a puppy, had this wild idea that this little puppy could be trained to do something we've never seen before. This type of person would have relentless drive to train this dog, to turn this into a workable product that could one day herd sheep. But, when it's time to sell the idea that they have to the target audience, like the people that are raising the sheep, there's a challenge here because the early adopter is excited about the work they've done and what's possible here. So they're like, this is so amazing. These puppies, you get to work with puppies all day long, and then you get to teach them, and they're responsive, and you'll be able to have them become something totally different. This is, you can do this. I did it. It's fun. Join me. Let's be with these puppies. And you come upon this early majority, your target audience, who are like, no, I raise sheep. I don't care about puppies. I don't want to train puppies. I've got a totally different suite of issues and problems and things on my plate, and I don't want it to have anything to do with your puppies. And so it's really demoralizing, right? Like you get to this point where you can see what's possible and it's not going anywhere. And so so we're going to transition here into this chasm framework where this chasm is real. It is a social and operational chasm between this idea that the early adopter has and the needs and activities of the early majority on the other side. So it's important to think that, to recognize that this is a thing and not to try to pretend that it doesn't exist, but to think about how to build bridges across the chasm in order to cross that chasm and meet the needs of the community that we're trying to serve. So this is a story about how we crossed the chasm at NOAA Fisheries. This bridge that we've been building with our open science early adopters and the early majority within the agency is through data and workforce modernization and through an initiative around open science. And so this is a 3-year initiative. We're in just coming into year 2 of this initiative. And it's really there's many different activities involved, but around community building, around training infrastructure. And that's 2 places where Openscapes is partnering with NOAA Fisheries to really support a Jupyter Hub and training activities like early intro to R, mentorship for organizers and leaders. And then there's also so much more that Eli and her team are leading through trainings, one-on-one support, testing new infrastructure. And so this is a big initiative that is approved and rolled out from the head of NOAA Fisheries, but it didn't start from the top. It started from this really grassroots effort that was years in the making by a lot of those people that just really loved puppies like us. So I want to talk about how we planned this. And as we were starting to see traction and to see what was possible within NOAA Fisheries, Eli found that the diffusion of innovation theory was so helpful to clarify our thinking and to be like a way to see where we were and as a roadmap. So this diffusion of innovation theory is by E.M. Rogers in 1962, and it's the idea that there's a predictable progression as an idea diffuses within a population. So the population here is NOAA Fisheries and all of the folks that are doing research, managing shipboard operations, satellite data, doing all kinds of important work at NOAA Fisheries. And it's important to understand the different parts of this population and the people involved as this idea moves through the population. So we've got a small group of innovators, and then this early who are many of us in this room, right? A lot of us are innovators and building things every day in different ways. And a lot of us are early adopters, folks that are taking something that's in an early rough stage potentially and transitioning it into something that could diffuse into the population. So it's important to understand this progression and to see these different characteristics and the proportion of people involved so that we don't put our energy in the wrong place, because that's when we can get demoralized. So early adopters are really critical to this diffusion of innovation theory. They are able to take something and see the value of it and transition it into something that could be workable through the whole population. And it's really our energy and effort that drives that initial diffusion process, but it's a slow process, and it's easy to lose sight of how big a proportion of people, of early adopters, we need to meet before this idea can diffuse further. And there is this real chasm between the early adopters and the early majority. There's differences in priorities, there's differences in personalities, whereas the early adopters are these people that can work with the puppy and see the end product. The early majorities are a much more diverse set of folks. These are hardworking, high-functioning people who have different priorities, who have different workflows that they've used their entire careers, and they're not as excited to change on a dime. There's people who are managers in this population too, and they are steering a really big ship and can't They're risk averse for a reason. So there's a lot of different incentives and priorities in this group. And it's really important to deeply understand and have empathy for this early majority, because it's when the early adopters see this chasm and can become demoralized, it's easy to resent this early majority that you're trying to serve and think that they're boring or they're unwilling to change. And that's really not true, but it's that there's this bridge that needs to be built, and those could be different skills and different allies that you need at this point in order to cross this chasm. So we think about this as movement building, and really, like, it's even a thing in terms of language where we're welcoming folks to join us. We're not trying to get them to do anything. And I think that's really important, because I don't like being gotten to do anything. So early adopters, they're hard to reach. Many are isolated. They don't identify as an early adopter. They're hard to find. So it's really important to think about deeply where your early adopters are. So crossing the chasm, this strategy that Eli and I developed was around developing the early adopter community. How do we find them? How do we provide value for them to engage with us? And how do we connect them? So in pre-2018 at NOAA Fisheries, it was really hard or impossible for early adopters to collaborate. There's no way to get information across each other. These were sort of historical silos of geography that were then reinforced digitally. There were no email lists across the agency. There were separate science centers and regional offices across the country. So Eli couldn't just email early adopters. But she thought really deeply through this diffusion of innovation theory about where would they be? They're rare. How do we find them? And she realized that they were hidden among the R users. R is a really powerful tool in fisheries. There's a lot of statistical modeling that is done through R. And Eli learned in 2021, and so 2021 was a year with big progress. Eli learned that there was an email list of this really specialized type of R user that creates stock assessment reports, which involves a lot of deep statistics, and that group had an email list. And Eli was able to basically infiltrate this email list and use that email list to promote a R course that she taught every year that was at that point really limited to her science center in Seattle and University of Washington. So she was able to use this email list to invite anyone across the agency to take this R course with her. And at the same year, we started working together with Openscapes and led 4 of our flagship training programs across the agency, upskilling 160 staff across the whole country. That was also the year that NASA Openscapes started, and I led that with Aaron Robinson. We created a whole GitHub organization where we were supporting NASA Openscapes mentors from across the NASA Earth Science agencies. And Eli saw that and was able to point to that and say, that's what we want. We can see it, we can advocate for this. This is a way forward. She also created a NOAA Fisheries R user group that had 100 different scientists from across the agency. And really asking the value for these folks, like what they were looking for was to connect and be able to learn new R stuff together. So creating an R user community was a huge deal to connect and find these early adopters. So assembling these early adopters and helping grow this community and support network was amazing. And then we were able to start thinking about understanding and helping the early majority. So part of this, and this is what the diffusion of innovation theory says, is to pick a problem so painful that crossing the chasm is worth the effort and the risk. And this is something that we couldn't come from the outside to say what was painful. It was through those years of working with those hundreds of scientists around the agency to see where the common, really hard pain points were. And this is like not the sexy, exciting stuff. This is like the early, really difficult stuff that people don't even know how to say out loud because it's so awful. The big painful problem in government is big government reports. Reports are super important in government. This is how they disseminate information. They are contributed by sometimes tens of people who are doing analyses, double checking, looking at compliance, handing things off. This is a figure from one of the teams we've been working with who are so awesome, the Marine Mammal Stock Assessment team. This is how they describe the reports, and they will say that they added that image in the middle. That's not part of the report schema. But the amount of handoffs and rooms for error and emailing it back, and the idea that multiple people are often working alone and handing something off to one person who's then responsible to collate it. So you could have 4 people across the same report all creating a map of the study area and spending their time there. So there's a lot of historic things that make this slow and hard and painful. So working with this group, we were able to help them transition to a new workflow around open science and open source tooling, where they're able to reuse each other's work, be aware of what's going on with this workflow that's mostly with R and Quarto and GitHub. And they're able to still create their PDFs, their Word documents, and also have HTML to share their research more widely with their partners. But they also had really key goals around this, too. It wasn't only about the technology. This was around reframing their whole process as a collaborative effort rather than something that they pass off like a baton, and to really focus on the reproducibility of this process so that they could spend more time on their science and on the people involved. They were able to incorporate new tools, but really focused on meeting staff where they were. So onboarding was huge for this, both onboarding themselves back onto this report after maybe a year of not looking at these initial files on an annual report, but also onboarding new people to the project and focusing on streamlining current processes, using project management tools in GitHub, and also maintaining compliance. I mean, there's a reason government reports have a lot of steps and checks, because they need to be compliant with a lot of local, federal laws and beyond. So part of this with Crossing the Chasm was also growing this movement, meeting and supporting teams as they were newcomers and welcoming them as contributors and helping amplify their stories, giving them the mic to amplify their stories. So they this team would come to the next training and share their story of Better Science, Less Time. So it's no longer, my story from 2017. It's like these active stories of their peers. There is real work and strategy involved with this effort, and so much more communication than you would ever imagine. 30 times more hours coordinating meetings, emails, welcoming people, asking their questions, listening, sort of asking deep questions and not assuming that the language that they're using is how you might interpret them using that language, because there's so much conceptual stuff that is hard to even articulate. So this was a figure from 2021 where we were starting to share the vision of what we wanted to build at NOAA Fisheries, and folks that we were working with and as we were growing this movement felt this too and were able to share this at their centers, and now here we are in 2025. So I want to say a little bit about how we operationalize that theory, and that's really where Openscapes has helped Eli and NOAA Fisheries take that vision and that roadmap and really put it into practice. So we work with organizations that want to make change, and we have an approach that supports them making that change, and then it's them as those awesome teams who lead change in whatever that means for them in many interwoven ways that are now networked across their original organization and with open source. And so this whole approach is really structured for co-creation, and it doesn't come from us to say what the goals should be or what the painful things are. This is really about partnership and co-creation. And so the center of how we work and this Openscapes approach is our flywheel. So this flywheel is another concept from Jim Collins, where transformation occurs from consistently doing key activities that add up over time. So a flywheel is something that can be really hard to push, and you might not see any progress on the first 10 or 100 or 1,000 times you push it, but then it starts to budge and it starts to fly. And so that's really this concept that we've built and iterated on, and this is a tool. This is an open source tool that we reach for planning, for progress checks, just like I would reach for R or Jupyter Hub to do an analysis. I reach for this for planning, and so I welcome you all to fork and use this as well. At a glance, this flywheel works on amplifying open leaders and supporting people already doing the work, then engaging a future us mindset as we onboard new folks so that we're able to think beyond our own laptops or beyond the own like lone hero model that we learn in academia, and then empower a learning culture as we go. So to dive in a little bit more deeply, we start off by leveraging common workflows or skills or tools or ideas. We call this forking. This is a word that comes from software development where you can take some code that works, put it in your own place, iterate it, and use it yourself. But importantly, it's connected back to the source so that you can give credit back to the source, you can contribute back, and it grows this network. So we think of forking as a worldview where we're forking ideas, we're forking stories, we're forking skills. You take what's working and you inspire more folks to join you. You do this through storytelling, through art. We welcome folks to join. We think a lot about onboarding, attention, meeting people where they are. We create space and place, both digitally, synchronously, asynchronously, and then start investing in learning and trust so that folks are able to ask hard questions, say what they don't know, say what's hard, and then work openly and build things together, and that then we can reuse and fork, and the flywheel turns again. So there's a lot. I could talk in much more depth on all of that, but I wanted to focus with this audience here about creating space and place. So just one aspect of this is co-working. This is one of the most actionable, immediate things groups can do, which is why I wanted to talk about it with you all. This is the idea of regularly scheduled places, either on Zoom or in person, with people who are not part of your normal work team. So when we have co-working, this is across NOAA Fisheries, an open invitation for people to come, and we see this movement building within each co-working session. This not only leads to cross-team awareness, but cross-team learning, and it's beyond like a ticket that might get fixed, and there's not necessarily awareness across the organization that that's been fixed, because we've got like real people involved who are working on it, who will take this back to the places that they came from. So there's a big part of solving problems and diffusing ideas that come through co-working, and onboarding has been a big part of this as well. So this is a sort of thing that comes to co-working is people will show up in the Zoom room, they'll say what they're working on that day, and we'll make breakout rooms, they'll go into things by theme and work on stuff. Sometimes it's, I'm working on a report and I figured out how to automate this thing, but I'm tinkering, and someone else is like, what? You can automate that? Can I watch while you screen share? Anyway, it's awesome. And it seems like a small thing, but it's huge. So I want to just pause here and have you all think about your groups. Is there a time where your group can come together, and not for a webinar or not for a social gathering, but to really ask what people are working on, to see someone's screen? We think about co-working as like a joyful accountability. It's a chance to get your own work done, but be able to say hello to some colleagues, maybe learn something, maybe be heads down this day. So it's rare. I'm wondering if, it'd be great to talk to you afterwards to see what you're doing at your own groups. So co-working is not just a lovely morale boost to get our own work done. There's really concrete things that come out of co-working. So one of the most visible examples is the Earth Access Python library that the NASA Openscapes mentors have been developing. And this is just an awesome, game-changing technical and social bridge between the NASA Earth data tooling stack and the scientific research community and the tools that they use. Earth Access has changed the first experience of accessing NASA Earth data in the cloud. This used to be maybe 30 lines of bash code and some hidden files and authentication with Earth data login that would send you to a different window, this has now made it into a few lines of Python code. And the reason it exists is because the NASA Openscapes mentors were co-working with each other to design how to teach NASA Earth data in the cloud, and then worked with real users and saw that it was hard to do that first thing. And they have built this through culture and community over the past few years, and there's now over 100 different projects that are dependent on this. And we're working with NASA to see what does it look like to bring more support and enterprise level support to this effort without losing how this the beauty of the culture and community that have made this possible. One thing I want to share too, particularly for this audience, is Virtualize R, which is a big focus of effort with Earth Access right now. This is about accessing archival formats as if they were cloud native. And I think that's really important here too, because as we're thinking about cloud native geo infrastructure, there's a lot of really important data that is not cloud native, and scientists use that all the time, and we need to think about how to make that easier for scientists while we're still innovating at the leading edge of cloud native. One other awesome example that came out of co-working is PyRocket. This is something that Eli Holmes developed with the NASA mentors, so a cross-agency collaboration, and with Carl Bodiger, who's part of the R Rocker developers. And this is solving the problem where in Jupyter hubs and other infrastructure, R and Python are often siloed. And even in a shared infrastructure, like asking an R user to install Conda or asking a Python user to use Reticulate, is really difficult. What can other handoffs look like? So PyRocket essentially enables a workflow where somebody can access physical and biological oceanographic data using the best available Python tools for accessing these data, do this in Python, and then in one tab of their Jupyter hub, and then in a second tab with the same Docker image, pass that over to R and work natively in RStudio for the statistical stuff. Deep statistical models. But it's this kind of thing used to be really hard to treat both R and Python as first-class citizens and enable people to work in their comfort zone. One other example from co-working is around forkable documentation for onboarding. This has been a huge theme across NOAA Fisheries, where having onboarding documentation at all, but having it in one place that is visible and then reusable across different places in the agency. So what's really awesome about this too is that they're using the same tooling to create non-data intensive manuals and reports that their colleagues are for creating data intensive reports. And so that sort of upskilling and mindset shifts then can be an entryway to more contribution in different ways while we're also supporting onboarding across the agency. So this is my last slide to kind of wrap things up, bring us back to this idea of crossing the chasm as movement building and what's possible for because of all of this. This kind of data modernization, workforce modernization really is about people and about, at NOAA Fisheries, these scientists being able to spend more time on their science and on their solutions and have more brain space for the important work that is why they were hired and why they love this job, and not those hard parts that get in the way. So it's about improved morale. It's about supporting people as people and enabling them to do really great work. And right now, this is a really, hard time for NOAA. And we don't have all the answers, right? But we're supporting these teams with more resilience and change. And they're awesome. So, yeah. Yeah, thank you all. Really, I'm so thrilled to be part of this whole community and to be supporting our colleagues on all different levels, and invite you to join the movement for kinder science, better science, and to think about how we can support our colleagues and build resilience going forward. So thank you.